lovely people, welcome back to another Story Study Saturday. I'm Sammy and I'm a writer who likes to learn about writing through reading and share what I learn with you. This week I am talking about Teaching the Teacher's Pet by Sarah Sutton, and I am a fan of Sarah Sutton as a person. I also love the genre that she writes. This was my go-to genre as a youth. I definitely fully thought that this would be the genre that I would be writing for the entirety of my life. I was convinced that I would be writing YA romance. I have been in a slump lately. I just haven't really been motivated by reading, so I knew that I needed to read something to be able to have a video up this week. So I grabbed this one. It's been on my Kindle for a while because I bought my Christmas presents early and I told Amazon, hey, don't worry about it, take your time. And they said, here's some digital money for free for your convenience of being nice to us. And I was like, thank you, I will take that and I will buy books by independent authors with it. So here I am, having read it, finally, months after buying it. But I will give you guys a quick summary of it and then we will get into my thoughts on this book. Brentwood High has a tradition. A list of people most likely to. Maisie has never been someone who is easily influenced by the opinions of others, but this year she's on the list as most likely to marry a math book. That would have been easy enough for her to deal with if she wasn't also asked to tutor the star football player and face of the popular group for a test that's being adjusted and offered as special treatment just so the football team can go to nationals. She is not up for it, but when the title of valedictorian is dangled in front of her and Connor Bray, the star football player, offers to give her love advice in exchange, she's swayed to do the work. Not happily. How will this new arrangement work out for them? Into my thoughts. This is a really cute story. It hits all of the marks that I would want in a story like this, and it really took me back to the days of being at summer camp and reading a book instead of playing dodgeball or like getting hit in dodgeball super early in the game so that I could just be out and read on the sidelines. And this would be the type of book that I would be reading 100%. It really brought out a lot of nostalgia in me, and I love it. I love that it did that. 10 out of 10. I think that both Connor and Maisie were very well developed and they were fleshed out as people, and they had their own things going on, their own things that they needed to worry about, and their own reasons for feeling how they feel about the world that they're in. And you discover a lot of these things gradually and in a way that makes it feel more natural than being like, hey, here's what's going on. Here's who I am as a person, especially from Maisie, which is something that could have happened really easily, of just displaying who she is on a platter instead of letting us get to know her as things came up. And this did a really good job of letting us get to know her as things came up. And then obviously she got to know Connor as things came up. There is a huge contrast between what Alex, Maisie's boyfriend, wants Maisie to be and who Maisie actually is and who Maisie wants to be. That is so clear and easy to see, being who I am right now. It's not something that I think Maisie had any reason to see on her own without being shown because of where she is in her life, being in high school and not really having ever had any other kinds of relationships. This opportunity to like learn about relationships and about what is important in a relationship is really great. It's done really well where it could teach people in the same area for like a red flag that they might not have seen had they not read this book in the same situation that Maisie was in. And I think that's really great. And it's a really, really awesome contrast. It's really interesting to see how that changes and builds and explodes and calms and floods and all of those other kinds of verbs, their relationship and their dynamic with each other, because as Maisie starts to see more, he starts to adjust more to try and make things easier in a way that could be considered manipulation, but also I don't think he's trying to manipulate, so I don't know if it is manipulation, but it's very well done. It's also interesting to see that the way that Maisie thinks about Connor at the beginning versus the way that she thinks about Connor at the end, and the way that she thinks about Alex at the beginning versus the way that she thinks about Alex at the end, how that changes based on this dynamic that she has with Alex and the new dynamic that she has with Connor, coming from this tutoring situation where she's tutoring him in math and he's trying to give her love advice on how to make her relationship better. Speaking of, the advice that Connor gives Maisie is amazing. It's so good in the way that he gives the advice, in the way that she reacts to the advice, in the way that she enacts the advice, and in the way that the advice leads to consequences and repercussions. And watching those things happen is so great. It's so great. It's done so well. Highly recommend. So what are some things that I think could be improved about this book? For one, the whole story takes place over about a month, and it's not an insta-love. It's not, because they don't ever say the word love. It's just like an insta relationship. It's a very quick development of this we are not even acquainted to like we're very acquainted kind of progression. And I don't want to be mad at it, because this is what happens in high school. It's very much what happens in high school. I wish there was more story. If I'm being honest, I wish that there was more to it, which is crazy because it was already like a reasonable sized book. And it's part of a series, but like it's not part of a series kind of thing. It's not a series where you really interact with the characters again. I'm pretty sure that the next two books happen kind of simultaneously to this one's story because it's a high school, which we'll get into in a little bit in the learn section. It's not really like, I'm not gonna get anything more. I did really love, there's a end chapter that you get that's a epilogue kind of bonus chapter thing where you get a scene that happens from Connor's perspective, and I think that was a really great addition. Like, I'm really happy that that was in there. Oh, man, I really backtracked myself. We're talking about improvements, not about the good things. Sorry, my bad. Yeah, so it's not an insta-love because I don't say that they love each other, but it's also just very fast, and I wish there was more space, but I also understand it's been a long time since I was in high school and things don't really take a lot of time, but the stakes that these characters are through, the way that they're feeling about the stakes makes it seem like it's gonna take a very long time, but it doesn't, so I just don't know about it, pretty much. Similarly, because it's high school, there were a lot of repetitive situations, and that's what high school is. I know that's what high school is, but it just felt so repetitive sometimes that they just kept doing the same things, and it was a little bit different because every day was a little bit different, but it was all kind of the same. And I felt like a lot of those things could have just been sort of a montage of things instead of us going through them all the time. But sometimes we got information that was really important, so I had to just let it go and just be in the repetitive situation because that's what it is to be in high school. It's always this, you go to the same 7 or 8 classes in the same order every single day until you're done. And that's it. So I can't be mad at it. I will say though, there was some emotional repetition, totally separate from the day-to-day, everything kind of being the same. But the way that the emotional repetition, it was like, I feel like this. And then it just kept happening. So it kind of took away some of the strength behind the feeling because it felt less genuine the more times that it was said. Especially for the more positive thoughts, it felt like self-talk, basically like, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay. And it's like, are you though? Because you keep saying that you're okay. So I'm starting to not believe it. And that could be just, I read it really fast. So those moments came up really quickly in the reading process. But at the same time, the story took place over a month. So they did happen a lot in that span of time. And there were a couple of blips in that span of time, that very short span of time that we had, where it was like something was supposed to happen later in the same day, but then the next chapter would start with the next day, and then it would be that thing that was supposed to happen later in that previous day. So I just had to like, it's not the next day, it's a few hours later, so that I would be in the right spot for the story instead of having questions about it. But those were just like very minor things that I caught because I do this, and I probably wouldn't have caught it if I didn't do this. Not really like a deal breaker or anything, it was just something I noticed. So what can writers learn from this story? I think this is a good example of how growing up doesn't necessarily mean that you have to change your interests, because I definitely thought this was the genre of books that I was going to be writing. This was the genre of books that I read all the time when I was actively reading as a youth, and I stopped reading because of school pressures and just my life feeling like I didn't have the time. It's very different to have a few classes in middle school or high school and then read a book when you're done with your homework versus being in college and having a job and having a lot of very high level classes and having a lot of readings that you have to do and then not ever wanting to read for fun. Coming out of that, I have a more expansive palette of books that I want to read, and they're not all the same genre. They're not all the same age range. They're not all in the same stage of life that I'm in or anything like that. And that makes me think that I have more capacity to tell different stories and that I kind of have shut down this genre for myself because I feel like I shouldn't write it because I have all of this capacity to write other stories, but that doesn't mean that I shouldn't be able to also write this kind of story. And I believe Sarah is about the same age as I am. I couldn't find anything about her age in the short span I started looking for it. Based on her vibe and her personality and how she is on social media, I feel like we're around the same age. And she's writing these books, lots of them. She's got a lot of these books out and they're all very good, I would assume, based on the reviews and based on this book. And I genuinely think that these are stories that should be told because people are gonna like them. People are gonna wanna read them. And it gives my inner child something to hold on to and hang on to it. And I think that that would be fun to write. So I'm gonna take this as an opportunity to let go of any of those unknown developed biases that I should write more advanced stories because they're simple. In my brain, they're simple. I understand how they work. I understand all of their mechanisms. I understand what goes into them. So it feels like it's a very easy thing to do. And that makes me think I shouldn't do it. But if I can do that very easy thing, I'm sure it's not actually very easy in practice, but if I can do that very easy thing well, then why shouldn't I? That's something that I'm taking away from this story. I think this is also a very good example of how people can feel like they are outcasts from different perspectives and from different ways of feeling that. They can feel like they are on the outside of situations for so many different reasons, and that feeling can be something that connects people. Conceptually, this series, I think, is a really smart idea because there's 3 books right now. I don't know if there's going to be another one, but the 3rd book is coming out at the end of this month, I believe. And I know the 2nd book is about Maisie's friend, and they both have the same like instigation for the start of their story, which is this list of the people most likely to whatever. And then they're navigating how that makes them feel, how they're going to overcome that or ignore it in Maisie's case. And her friend is voted most likely to never get a first kiss or something like that, and that's the 2nd book. But these stories are happening simultaneously. And that's so interesting to me because I've never really thought about high school that way. Because a lot of the stories that I've read that are this YA kind of genre that take place in high school, they are based on the one character, and the one character is the only character that we care about. But there's so many people in a high school at any given moment that you can have so many stories going on, and you've built this world, you've built this set of structures and the ways that these people interact, that why not play around with other people in the story? Everybody in your high school thinks that they are the main character of their own story. They're all living their lives as their own main character. So why can't you take their main character story and continue to play with it? It's so interesting. It's so interesting. And I would love to see all of the people on this list, how all of these people interact with this, because it's all going to take place in the same general span of time. It's all going to be like their senior year. They're all going to navigate that thing, and that's going to be it. But there's so much potential for it. And I think that's so smart. And I've never thought of that. And it's brilliant. It's so incredibly smart. And I am genuinely kind of excited to explore the thought of that in a way that is more my own and not necessarily like, oh, I'm gonna take this concept and continue with it and take her story idea, because that's insane. Don't do that. But it's not something I've ever thought about. And I have enough memories of high school and enough knowledge of different types of people that were at my high school that I think that that's an opportunity that I've never ever considered. And if I'm going to consider YA romance as a potential genre that I can write, why would I not explore the idea of simultaneous stories crossing paths. You also get to meet some of the other characters in the next books, and I know their names because I follow her on Instagram and I've seen her promoting these books. So you run into some of these other characters because you're in a high school and they're just there, and you get to interact with these people because they're there. And that's so interesting to me that they have those like tie-ins to other characters and other stories that are based on other characters. And the same thing happens in the Stolen Kingdom series, where all of the books are based on different protagonists, except for the fourth book where they all come together. Haven't gotten that far in the series, but you get to meet the other characters as the story goes on. And you're introduced to the next protagonist or different parts of the world's protagonists gradually. And I think that's super interesting that this is another opportunity to do that. It doesn't have to just be a story that takes place in this crazy fantastical world where there's magic and all of this stuff, but it can also happen in a high school. Like, I can't believe I'd never thought of that before. Yeah. But that's all that I've got for you today. Have you heard of Sarah Sutton? For one, have you read any of her books? I would love to know if you have any other recommendations, because I will be finishing this series, but I don't know where to jump next in her repertoire. So if you've read any of her other books, let me know what I should go to next. If you enjoyed this video or you learned something from it, please leave a like. It'll really help me out and show YouTube that maybe more people would also enjoy this video. If you don't want to miss any of my uploads, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell next to it. I'm here every Tuesday and Saturday for Writing Tip Tuesdays and Story Study Saturdays. So I will see you guys back here on Tuesday.